I always thought the kitchen was the safest place in the house. Warm lights, morning coffee, leftover pizza, a place for sleepy conversations and harmless teasing, a space where things felt simple, ordinary. But that illusion shattered the moment Eli pressed up behind me, close enough to feel the heat of him, close enough that I couldn't ignore the weight of his presence. He whispered my name like it meant something more, and touched me like he already knew I wouldn't stop him. Looking back, it didn't start with that touch. It started much earlier, with one look, just a glance. That's all it took. When my sister Sophie brought Eli home, I didn't think much of it. Another boyfriend, another phase. She had a type, the charming, clean-cut kind who smiled like they meant it and always knew what to say. They never stayed long. And Eli, he didn't seem much different at first. Tall, confident, that sharp jaw and too easy laugh. The kind of guy who could make anyone feel seen, and yet, somehow, you never really saw him. I met him in the kitchen. Naturally. "You must be Drew," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, but it was his eyes that held me in place, hazel with this strange, golden tint. I couldn't look away, even when I tried. "Your sister says you're the quiet one." I gave a half shrug. "Guess so." The moment should have passed. It should have meant nothing. But even as I pulled my hand away, something lingered, some kind of invisible thread, already pulling tight. That evening, I mostly stayed in my room, headphones on, pretending not to hear their laughter floating down the hall from the living room. I told myself I wasn't paying attention. But when I stepped out for water, Eli glanced up from the couch. Just a glance. That should have been all. But he didn't look away. His eyes met mine and stayed there, steady, unblinking, curious. Then he smiled. It wasn't flirtatious. But it wasn't casual either. It landed somewhere in between. Somewhere dangerous. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of toast and eggs. Sophie's voice drifted through the apartment, light and teasing. "You better get used to cooking for me, Eli." When I walked into the kitchen, I froze for a second. Eli was barefoot, hair still damp from a shower, shirt rumpled as he stood at the stove flipping eggs like he belonged there, like he'd always been here. He glanced over his shoulder. "Morning, man." I mumbled a soft morning, trying not to let my eyes linger, trying not to notice how good he looked at 8 a.m. or how natural he seemed in our space. He handed me a plate without being asked. "I guess you'd be hungry." "Thanks." Sophie breezed past and planted a kiss on his cheek. "He makes a decent breakfast. I might keep him." "Big commitment," I said, trying to sound bored. Eli chuckled. "Don't worry, Drew. I'm good at long-term things." The way he said it, it twisted something low in my gut. It wasn't what he said, it was the way he said it. Like a promise. Like he was saying something meant just for me, even with Sophie standing right there. That afternoon, while Sophie was upstairs on a work call, I found myself back in the kitchen making tea. The kettle was still warm. The light above the sink hummed. And then I felt him behind me. "Herbal stuff?" he asked, voice low and close. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Helps me sleep." He stepped closer, close enough that his chest brushed against my back as he reached for a mug in the cabinet just above me. His body touched mine, just briefly, but it was enough to steal my breath. "Sorry," he murmured, voice soft against my neck. "Didn't mean to crowd you." But he didn't look sorry. His eyes met mine and stayed. There was something in his gaze. A question, maybe, or a dare, like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. I gave him nothing, just a nod, and I turned away to pour the water. But for the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the touch, but the way it felt intentional. That night, I wandered back into the kitchen again. Everyone else had gone to bed. The apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears when you're the only one awake. The overhead light above the stove cast a soft glow across the countertops. I stood there, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, staring into nothing. I didn't hear him come in. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked behind me, voice lower now, barely above a whisper. I turned, startled. Eli stood there, shirtless, wearing only flannel pajama pants that hung low on his hips. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Nah, he said. Thought I'd grab some water. He moved past me, brushing my arm with his as he reached for a glass. I didn't flinch, but I felt my pulse quicken. You really don't talk much, huh? He asked as he filled the glass. I gave a small shrug. Guess I don't have much to say. I don't buy that, he said, leaning against the counter again. You've got a lot going on in your head. I can tell. I blinked. What makes you say that? He took a slow sip. Because you watch. Watch what? Everything, he said simply. People who don't talk much tend to watch. And people who watch usually see things others miss. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to stay grounded. His words, they weren't wrong. And what have I missed? I asked, barely louder than a whisper. He tilted his head. Nothing. That's what's interesting. We stood there in that too-quiet kitchen. The fridge hummed. The wall clock ticked. The silence stretched. But it didn't feel empty. It felt charged. He stepped forward, just a little, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his skin. Tell me to back off, he said. His voice was soft, but it vibrated through me. I looked up at him, eyes searching, but I said nothing. And neither did he. We just stood there, on the edge of something neither of us had planned, but both of us felt. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. It all started in the kitchen. And nothing was going to be the same again. The air between us shifted, thinned, like the space we'd tried to keep intact was slowly dissolving. You're not what I expected, he said. I laughed, too quickly, too sharp. What did you expect? He didn't answer right away, just offered that slow, unreadable smile of his, the kind that curled at the edges but gave nothing away. I'm not sure yet, he murmured. I left the kitchen before I could say something reckless, before I could ask what he meant, before I could admit, even to myself, that I didn't hate the way he looked at me, or how it made me feel. I climbed into bed that night, pulled the blanket over my head, and stared up at the ceiling, trying to shake the way his eyes lingered. He was just my sister's boyfriend. That was the truth. That was the rule. So why did it already feel like he was something else? At the time, I didn't know this was something else. Not yet. The next few days passed in a blur of fragmented moments, awkward breakfasts, clipped conversations, stolen glances I tried to pretend I didn't notice. I kept repeating to myself that it was nothing, that maybe Eli was just one of those people who flirted by default, that I was imagining the way his gaze hung on me, the way his shoulder brushed mine, and didn't move away. But there's a moment when you stop ignoring and start counting. That's when you know something's shifting. Sophie didn't seem to notice. She was caught up in her own world, balancing work calls, friend hangouts, and planning a weekend getaway with Eli like everything was perfectly ordinary. You're cool if Eli sticks around while I'm at yoga tomorrow morning, right? She asked casually over dinner. He's making breakfast again. I nodded. Sure. She smiled brightly, missing the sudden charge that flickered across the table. Eli just smirked, leaning back in his chair. You're getting spoiled, he said. That night, sleep came reluctantly. My thoughts tangled, restless, uncertain. And when I finally drifted off, I dreamt in colors that didn't make sense and voices I couldn't place. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Not on purpose. Just a strange feeling tugging at me. Like the day had been waiting for me to catch up. The house was silent. Still, sunlight slanted through the blinds as I made my way down the stairs in sweatpants and an oversized tee. I paused in the hallway. The scent of cinnamon and butter drifted through the air. Warm, sweet, familiar. My heart tapped faster. Quietly, I stepped to the kitchen doorway. Eli stood at the stove, back turned, sleeves rolled to his elbows, humming under his breath. He flipped slices of French toast in the pan, focused, unbothered. There was a faint smudge of flour near his collarbone. It should have felt domestic, harmless, but somehow it didn't. He turned when he heard me. Morning, he said, voice easy, like this wasn't strange. Sleep okay? I nodded and stepped inside, suddenly too aware of how small the kitchen felt. Hope you're hungry. I'm making mean cinnamon toast. You've made it every day since you got here, I muttered, grabbing a glass. He grinned. That's 'cause you keep eating it all. He nudged my side as he passed behind me. Not hard, but not casual either. It lingered just a little too long. I froze, water forgotten, pretending not to notice the way my pulse picked up. He placed a plate in front of me, then leaned against the counter across from where I sat, arms folded. "So, tell me something," he said, tapping a fork thoughtfully against his lip. "Are you always as quiet or just around me?" "I don't talk much. In general." He nodded, eyes studying me. "No, I think you're holding back." I shrugged, chewing slowly. "Why would I?" "Maybe you're afraid of what happens if you don't." The words landed with a strange weight, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, like he knew. He moved behind me again, reaching up for a mug on the top shelf. His chest brushed lightly against my back. This time, I didn't move. His hand trailed past mine, slow and deliberate, as he reached forward. His fingers grazed my side. Not quite a touch, not quite not. I inhaled sharply. Not loud, but enough. "Sorry," he said softly, though his tone didn't sound sorry at all. "Too close." I didn't answer. My thoughts were crashing into each other. Then I turned, slowly, facing him fully. "What are you doing?" His eyes met mine, steady, unreadable, but there was something simmering underneath. Curiosity, maybe, or something else. Something deeper. Something he wasn't ready to admit. "I don't know," he said. "You tell me." That was the thing with Eli. He never told you what he really meant. He just stepped close enough to the edge and waited to see if you'd jump. I stepped back. "You're with my sister." He didn't flinch. "I know." "Then maybe don't touch me like that again." A beat passed. His gaze lingered on me a second longer than it should have. Then he raised his hands like he was surrendering. "You're right. My bad." But his voice didn't sound like it believed in mistakes. His smirk didn't fade, and neither did the warmth of his fingers where they grazed my skin. I left the kitchen. I needed distance. Air. Sanity. Because I didn't know what this was turning into. And worse, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. The rest of the day, I avoided him. Stayed in my room, headphones on, trying to focus on playlists I couldn't follow. When I finally came out, he was curled on the couch beside Sophie, his arm draped lazily around her shoulders. She looked happy, comfortable, and he looked normal, like nothing had happened. But I knew better now. I had felt the difference. The next morning, Sophie had to leave early for work. I stayed in bed longer than usual, half hoping Eli would be gone too, that the moment would pass without follow-up. But when I came downstairs, he was right there, shirtless at the counter, eating cereal straight from a box. He looked up as I entered, a flicker of something in his eyes. "Still mad at me?" he asked. I wasn't mad. I said carefully, "Just confused." He set the box down and walked over slowly, stopping just short of stepping into my space. "Don't be," he said. "You didn't imagine it." My breath hitched. "What?" "That thing. In the kitchen." His voice dropped lower. "It wasn't an accident." I stared at him, heart knocking against my ribs. He leaned in, his mouth close to my ear. "And neither is this." Then he walked away. Like he hadn't just said something I'd be replaying over and over. Like none of it meant anything. But we both knew it did. The silence between us had been torn open, and with it, something irreversible. I stood there in the kitchen, hands trembling lightly against the edge of the counter, trying to remember who I was before that moment, before the air between us shifted and the gravity of things started pulling in a different direction. But it was already too late, because no matter how much I told myself, it didn't mean anything. I knew now I hadn't imagined it. He had started something, and it felt like this was just the beginning. For the next 2 days, I pretended like nothing had happened. I washed the dishes. I went on long walks that led nowhere. I said good morning to Sophie with a smile that didn't belong to me, like my skin hadn't just been set on fire in the kitchen by the man sitting next to her. But Eli didn't flinch. He didn't act awkward or guilty. In fact, he acted like everything was fine, like the moment that burned itself into my memory had been nothing but a flicker, a glitch. a dropped frame in the middle of our lives. And maybe that was the worst part, because everything had changed for me. I avoided being alone with him, but somehow he always found a way to catch me at the edges of things. A brush of his hand when passing the salt, a smirk when Sophie wasn't looking, his knee bumping mine under the dinner table like some private signal. And no apology, no excuse, just that same look, like he was daring me to acknowledge it, to say out loud. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him, but I didn't, because deep down, a part of me, the part one usually kept locked away, didn't want it to stop. And that part, the one I should have buried deeper, was getting louder. It all came to a head Thursday afternoon. Sophie had picked up a last-minute shift, some rescheduled dinner service at the restaurant, and left Eli behind. She kissed him on the cheek, waved at me like it was any other day, and disappeared to the door in a blur of car keys and perfume. I was hoping Eli would leave too, maybe go to the store, or out for a drive. But he didn't. I could hear him downstairs, moving around, quiet but present. I holed up in my room, headphones in, pretending I didn't feel restless, pretending I wasn't waiting to hear his footsteps on the stairs, that I wasn't listening for him without even meaning to. When I finally came down, needing water or maybe just an excuse, he was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, forearms taut as he chopped something on the cutting board. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. "Didn't think you'd show your face today," he said, voice calm, almost amused. "Didn't think I needed your permission." I shot back a little too fast. He smirked, unbothered. "Fair." I moved to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. His gaze followed the whole time, quiet and heavy. Then finally, "You've been avoiding me." "Have I?" "You have." He set the knife down and leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "You think that'll make it easier?" "I think you're playing a dangerous game," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, just a little. "And what if I am?" I didn't back away. "You're with my sister, Eli." He didn't blink. "Do I look like I'm laughing?" He was closer now, not touching me, but I could feel it, that buzz, that invisible thread that tugged whenever we were in the same room for too long. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was alive. "I'm serious," I said. "This isn't just some whatever." "Then say it," he murmured. "Tell me to stop." His hand moved. Slow, deliberate, just lifting slightly, like he was about to touch me. I flinched, not because I was scared, but because I felt it everywhere. "Eli," I warned, my voice unsteady. "Tell me to stop," he said again. "And I will." I opened my mouth, but the words didn't come, because I didn't know what I wanted anymore. And maybe he knew that. But then he stopped. His hand dropped. The air broke. And instead of pressing forward, he stepped back. His jaw tightened, like he'd fought some invisible battle and barely won. He looked at me a moment longer, just looked, then turned away, grabbing the knife again. He didn't touch me. He didn't say anything else. But the tension lingered, wrapping around the walls like smoke. I stood there frozen, watching him go back to chopping vegetables like the last 30 seconds hadn't nearly torn the ground out from beneath us. That night, Sophie left around 6. Some dinner with friends. She didn't want to cancel. She kissed Eli goodbye, light and easy, then waved at me from the door. "Don't burn the house down," she joked. "Wouldn't dream of it," I replied, somehow managing a grin. She had no idea. After she left, I found myself in the kitchen again, hands gripping the sink like it could steady me. The sunset had turned the tile floor gold. The countertops glowed in soft light. It didn't feel like the same kitchen anymore. This was the place where I learned to make pancakes, where I helped Mom with school projects, where Sophie lit birthday candles year after year. Now it felt like the walls had witnessed something they weren't meant to see. And before I could turn around, I felt him. Eli's presence always came before sound, like a storm creeping in, heat, pressure, tension in the air. He walked in without a word. I didn't move. Couldn't. Then finally, quietly, "So." I turned, slowly. "So." He leaned on the island, hands resting wide apart. "We can't keep doing this." "You think I don't know that?" "Then why?" He started, then stopped, shook his head. "Never mind." I crossed my arms, leaning back against the counter. "Say it." But he didn't. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and it was all there, in his eyes. The confusion, the guilt, the pull, the what-ifs, all of it. "I didn't mean for this to get complicated," he said finally. "Too late for that." I muttered. He gave a bitter little laugh. "Yeah." And then we stood there in silence, the clock ticking, the fridge humming, the sky outside fading from amber to blue. When he finally left the room, he didn't say goodbye. He just walked past me, brushing my shoulder lightly, like a question still unanswered. And I stood there in the kitchen, not knowing how we'd gotten here, not knowing how to go back, but knowing, deep down, that something had started, something neither of us was ready for. And no matter how much we tried to deny it was already too late. What came next? I didn't know, but it would change everything. "Just go back upstairs, Eli." I didn't turn around when I said it. My eyes stayed fixed on the street lamp outside the window, the way its glow caught the haze of dust in the air. I knew he was standing behind me. I could feel it, like the charge before a storm. He stepped closer. The wooden floor creaked under his weight, a quiet, telling sound that made my chest tighten. "Why do you always do that?" His voice was calm, but something flickered beneath it. I blinked slowly. "Do what?" "Act like this is one-sided." That made me turn. I faced him at last, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. My chest ached with a weight I didn't know how to carry. "Because it's easier," I said. "Easier than dealing with the fact that it's not." He exhaled, something soft and saddened sound. Then he stepped closer again into my space, the air between us thinning until it almost vanished. He wore that same black shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows like always, and his eyes locked on mine, unreadable but sharp. "Then stop lying to yourself," he said. "I'm not lying," I whispered, though even I could hear how unconvincing it sounded. I can't do this." "You already did." There was no edge in his voice, just quiet certainty. I swallowed hard. "I don't know what you want from me." His gaze didn't waver. "I want you." The words landed between us like a match dropped in dry grass. The silence that followed was loud, an invisible wire pulled tight and trembling. I didn't move. I should have. He reached out, slowly, brushing his fingers down my arm like he was asking permission without words. My skin responded before I could. I shivered, half in resistance, half in surrender. "You want this too," he murmured. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My body had already betrayed me. And then he was kissing me. It wasn't like last time, not a question, not a mistake. This time it was a declaration. Urgent, hot. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left. I could feel the beat of his heart, or maybe it was mine, thudding against my ribs as he kissed me like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than he'd admit. I gasped when his fingers tightened against my sides, grounding me, drawing me in. Everything inside me screamed that this was wrong, but I didn't push him away. I couldn't. My hands were already in his shirt, gripping the fabric like it was the only thing holding me upright. "Do you even know what you do to me?" he breathed against my mouth, voice thick with want and something else. Something fragile. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. He kissed me again, slower now, like he was memorizing the shape of my lips. One of his hands came up to cup my cheek, and for a heartbeat, the world softened. It didn't feel forbidden. It didn't feel like a mistake. It just felt real. But that moment couldn't last. We both knew better. When he pulled back, our breathing was uneven. I kept my eyes on the floor, afraid of what I'd see if I looked up. "You okay?" he asked, quiet now. I nodded. The truth felt too complicated to fit inside a single word. "We shouldn't have done that," I said. "I know." He stepped back, letting the air return between us. But I won't pretend I regret it. My legs fell unsteady as I stepped away from him, brushing past into the hallway. I need to clear my head. He didn't follow me. I shut the bedroom door behind me and sank to the floor, my back against the wall, head in my hands. My whole body still buzzed from his touch, from the kiss that shouldn't have happened but did. And the worst part, the thing that knotted my stomach into something sharp and twisted, was that I already knew I would let it happen again, because part of me didn't want this to stop. Not yet. For the next few days, Eli played his role like nothing had happened. He brought Sophie flowers, took her out for dinner, held her hand at the farmer's market, and helped her carry groceries in like the perfect boyfriend he was supposed to be. And me, I became a shadow, a quiet spectator in my own house. I watched him kiss her cheek and laugh at her jokes, knowing he'd kiss me harder, deeper, like he needed me. But he didn't ignore me. That was the cruelest part. He'd glance at me over her shoulder, eyes catching mine with that spark, that reminder, like he knew I remembered how he tasted, like he wanted me to remember. And I did, every second. He made me feel things I couldn't explain, things I didn't want to feel, things I couldn't undo. It was a Tuesday afternoon when it happened again. Sophie had left to run errands, something about picking up dry cleaning and grabbing coffee with a friend. I was sprawled on the couch, half watching a movie, doing my best not to count the minutes she'd be gone. Then I heard him come downstairs. He didn't say anything at first, just walked in with damp hair and that same casual confidence that made my pulse race. Gray sweatpants, plain white t-shirt. No warning. He sat beside me. Too close. His thigh brushed mine and I stiffened. "You're going to pretend I'm not here again?" he asked, voice low. I muttered, "But you won't." The silence tightened around us like a noose. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't breathe right. And then I felt his hand, warm, firm, resting on my thigh. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't asking. "Eli," I started. "No one's here," he said, his voice calm, dangerous in how certain it was. "Just you and me." His thumb moved just slightly and my breath caught. I told myself I wouldn't cross this line again. I whispered, eyes still glued to the screen. "Lying doesn't suit you," he said. I looked at him then. His expression was softer than I expected. Not arrogant, not manipulative, just honest, a little sad. "I think about you more than I should," he admitted. "And I know what that means, but I don't know how to shut it off." I swallowed, every nerve in my body buzzing. "I don't want to be a secret." He nodded slowly. "I know." "Then why are we doing this?" "Because we can't help it." His hand slid away as he stood, pacing a few steps like he needed to move the energy out of him. I sat there frozen, torn between guilt and gravity. He turned back to me. "You think I don't feel it? The way everything shifts when you walk into a room?" My throat tightened. "Eli, please." "I don't want to lie anymore," he said. "Not to myself. Not to you." I looked at him, really looked and saw it. The storm behind his eyes. The ache in his posture. "You can't have us both," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I don't know how to let you go either." The room felt too small for both of us, too full of everything we couldn't say. He sat down again, but this time didn't touch me. He just looked ahead, same as I did, like two people trapped in a moment neither of us asked for but couldn't leave. And somewhere in the distance, the door remained closed. I told myself I wouldn't let it happen again, that I'd put distance between us, that I'd remember who he was and what this was doing to me. But lies taste sweet when you're desperate to believe them, and I had been feeding on that sweetness far too long. We were in the living room, just the two of us. Sophie had gone out to run errands, and I was trying to distract myself with a movie I wasn't watching. The screen played shadows across the walls, but the real flicker of danger came from the seat beside me. Eli, fresh from a shower, hair still damp, wearing an old white t-shirt and sweatpants like it meant nothing. He sat close, too close. I didn't look at him, didn't speak, but I could feel him. "You're going to pretend I'm not here again?" he asked, voice low. I stiffened. "I should, but you won't." I hated how right he was. Silence stretched between us, full of all the things we couldn't say. And then I felt it, his hand on my leg. Not accidental, not innocent. "Lie." I warned, but there was no weight behind it. "No one's here," he murmured. Just you and me. I should have moved. I should have made him stop. Instead, I stayed frozen. His fingers hovered near mine, and before I knew it, I was leaning toward him, pulled by something stronger than logic. He kissed me like it was inevitable, like we'd always end up here no matter how hard we tried not to. And once again, I let myself fall. The rest of it blurred. I only remember the feeling afterward. The silence, the shame, the ache in my chest that had nothing to do with physicality and everything to do with regret. We sat together, but worlds apart, and I wonder how many more pieces of myself I was willing to lose to keep the secret alive. That night, I sat at dinner across from them. Sophie was glowing, laughing at something Eli said. She looked happy, really happy, and it gutted me. Eli's arm was around her chair, his smile picture perfect. But then his gaze flicked to me, just for a second, and he smirked. I looked away. Later, after she'd gone to bed, I tiptoed into the kitchen for water, still dressed in pajama pants and a loose shirt. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't expect to see him there. Eli leaned against the counter, sipping from a glass like he belonged there. When he saw me, his smile returned. Can't sleep either? You need to stop, I said, voice barely more than a whisper. This is destroying me. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Then why do you keep coming back, he asked. Because you won't let me go. Exactly. The truth landed between us like a stone dropped into water, rippling outward, unavoidable. I turned to leave, but he stepped forward. I didn't move. Couldn't. And that was enough for him to lean in again, that same look in his eyes like I was something precious and forbidden all at once. Only this time I didn't give in. I pulled away, gently but firmly. We can't keep doing this, I said, my voice trembling. You're with her. And she thinks you're good. Eli's expression changed. Just a flicker, like something behind his eyes cracked. You're not just some fling, Drew, he said. Then what am I? He hesitated. That silence told me everything. He didn't answer because he couldn't, because there was no right answer that didn't hurt someone. He stepped back, but the damage was already done. The moment stayed lodged in my chest like a thorn, aching with every breath. I sat on the kitchen floor after he left, knees to my chest, trying to breathe through the guilt clawing up my throat. I should have stopped this long ago. Should have walked away when I still could. But the truth was simple, and it scared me. I didn't want to. Not really. The next morning, everything was too quiet. The kitchen still smelled faintly like coffee and last night's mistakes. I avoided it, stayed upstairs brushing my teeth twice, trying to scrub the shame off my skin. Downstairs, I heard Sophie humming, blissfully unaware. I waited until it felt safe, then made my way down. Eli was already at the table, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. He looked up when I entered, and I swear, that same casual smirk appeared for just a second. I sat. I ate. I smiled when Sophie passed me the salt, and I tried not to shatter under the weight of what she didn't know. But Eli didn't make it easy. Under the table, our knees brushed. Once, twice. Each time was deliberate, calculated, like he wanted to remind me that he could still touch me without anyone noticing. And I let it happen. That afternoon, I found Sophie on the porch, iced tea in hand, scrolling through her phone with a soft laugh. The sun hit her hair in a way that made her look almost ethereal. So alive, so real. Do you think he's the one? I asked. She looked up, surprised. Eli, she asked. I nodded, hard in my throat. She smiled shyly. I don't know. Maybe. He's different. Different. That was one word for it. He makes me feel safe, she added, voice softer now. I haven't felt that in a long time. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, to rip the illusion from her hands before it destroyed her too. Instead, I nodded. He seems like a good guy. That night, I skipped dinner, said I had a headache, stayed in my room, lights off, door locked. I thought maybe I could still get out of this if I just stopped participating. But Eli never followed rules. At 11 p.m., there was a soft knock on my door. I didn't answer. The knob turned anyway. What do you want? I asked, not turning around. He stepped in quietly, kneeling beside my bed. "You haven't looked at me all day. Maybe I'm trying to forget you." "You don't mean that." I looked at him then. His eyes were darker in the low light, unreadable and familiar all at once. "You're going to destroy me," I said, voice cracked open. "I already have." The words didn't carry anger, just exhaustion, maybe even a little sorrow. He reached out like he wanted to touch me, but this time I pulled away first. "You should go," I whispered. He stayed for a moment, as if waiting for me to change my mind, but I didn't. Eventually, he stood and left the room without another word, and I was alone again, with nothing but silence, guilt, and the growing weight of a choice I couldn't take back. He whispered it like a confession, his lips finding mine before I could stop him. Soft at first, then deeper, desperate. And just like that, everything inside me unraveled again. I pulled him onto the bed with a force I didn't recognize, some tangled knot of anger, longing, and surrender. We didn't speak. Our mouths were too busy, our bodies too lost in each other. There wasn't space for words, only breath, only skin, only the ache of pretending we didn't already know how this would end. It was Messier this time, rough, frantic, desperate, like we were trying to burn through every last bit of what we had left before it collapsing on itself, before one of us finally said what neither of us wanted to hear. When it was over, I lay against him, my face pressing to his shoulder, both of us still trembling. His fingers lazily traced shapes along my back, like he was trying to memorize a feeling. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. He exhaled hard. "I don't either. You need to choose." His whole body tensed. "I'm not saying it to push you," I said gently. "But this sneaking around, it's killing me." He sat up, rubbing his face like he hadn't slept in days. "You think this is easy for me?" "No," I said, "but it's not fair either." He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes distant, as if they were trying to find a version of this where no one got hurt. I watched him dress in silence. There was something different in the way he moved this time, like the weight of all our stolen moments had finally caught up to him. At the door, he turned and looked at me one last time. "What?" I asked. He stepped forward and kissed me. Soft, slow, almost gentle. "Let this be the last time." I didn't respond, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't believe him. The next morning, he was gone. He packed a bag, told Sophie he needed space, that he had things to figure out. She was confused, heartbroken, shattered, and I was right there, holding her while she cried, pretending I wasn't the reason why. I said all the right things, lied through my teeth with practiced ease, told her she'd be okay, that he just needed time, that maybe it wasn't about her at all, but it was. Eli didn't text, didn't call, didn't come back for days. The silence should have felt like peace, but instead, it felt like a hole being carved into my chest one slow second at a time. I told myself I'd move on. I'd breathe. I'd finally get free. But every time I stepped into the kitchen, I remembered his hands on me, right there against the fridge. I remembered his mouth, the way he whispered my name like it meant something, even when it didn't. And then, just when I thought maybe it was finally over, my phone buzzed. One message. "I can't stop thinking about you." That was all it said. No name, no context, just 11 words that cracked open the walls I had barely started to rebuild. I stared at it, my heart pounding, hands trembling, because I knew exactly who it was from, and I knew exactly what it meant. This wasn't the end, not even close. This was the part one was supposed to walk away, the part where you learn the lesson and start over. But all it did was pull me right back in. He had walked out of our lives, but not out of my mind. Every corner of this house still echoed with him, with us, especially the kitchen, where the line between love and betrayal had disappeared beneath his fingertips. I tried to forget, tried to pretend I wasn't still waiting for that knock, that look, that breathless moment when everything would fall apart all over again. But that message, it was a spark, and deep down I knew I was still holding gasoline. So now I'm asking you, should I answer him? Should I let him back in and risk it all again? Or should I finally walk away before there's nothing left for me to save? What would you do? If this story hit you hard, like, comment, and subscribe for more emotionally intense narratives that linger long after the screen goes dark. Drop your thoughts below. Would you reply to that message? Or would you finally let go? Hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, the story isn't over. Not even close.